Let's talk about side decks. If you're a longtime subscriber of this channel, you would know that I returned to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game in summer 2018 after a 14-year hiatus. I played the game shortly after its North American release and retired in 2004. During that time, the side deck existed, but it was rarely utilized. At least that's how it was at my locals. Given how important the side deck is today, I guess some of you are wondering, how can you not have a side deck? I have a few theories on why that was the case. For one, the meta wasn't clearly defined in the game's early days. The closest thing we got was beatdown. Just get your strongest monsters out fast and run over your opponent. Another could be due to the rules surrounding the side deck in general. The official rulebook from that time period stated that if you have a side deck, it must contain 15 cards. If it had less, you cannot have a side deck at all. This rule was quite harsh. You have to understand, there was not a lot of cards to choose from at that time. It was easy to build a deck around a standard strategy of offense, defense, and disruption. There was little else to create a side deck to build and swap out of without changing the deck's integrity. So almost no one at my locals used one. The only exception I can think of was a duelist whom I learned the game with made a side deck for the sole purpose of being matched up with my dragon deck. The primary cards were 3 dragon capture jars, but in order to comply with the rules, she added 12 other cards. Most of them would not be considered useful against other decks. Most people barely had enough cards as it is to create a main deck, so a side deck was not a priority. This did change over time, however, as more sets were being released, and this is where the idea of staples came into play. Deck building was becoming more diverse, and in order to keep your deck as close to 40 cards as possible, some cards could not be included for the sake of consistency. Well, as consistent as you could be back then, yet they still had a place in your strategy. Even cards that did not add to your core strategy were becoming useful. They had the purpose of defending yourself depending on the matchup, the Dragon Capture Jar being a core example here. But even then, side decking was still uncommon. Most people were quite content with how their decks operated and found that swapping between their side deck to be a hassle, and would only do it in extreme cases. I had an opponent who swapped in a soul release when they realized I was playing my Exodia deck. This would be useful in banishing my Forbidden One cards. Today, the side deck is essential. Dual diversity is massive, and so making the side deck became more challenging. So how do we make a side deck, and what should you consider when making one? Well, the first point is the rules have vastly changed since the old days. You can have 1 to 15 cards, and these can include extra deck monsters. Currently, the most common strategy in building a side deck is using staples, cards that can deal with the back row and disrupt your opponent's plays. But these staples can change over time, which brings me to the most important points and why you should consider in side deck building. Study the meta and your local competition. We all see deck profiles posted online that include a side deck. I do this myself, but these should always be taken with a grain of salt. After all, what I use in my side deck may not be effective against the competition at your locals. So it doesn't matter if you're new or a veteran of the game. Always pay attention to what your competition is playing, and build your side deck accordingly. Some cards are universal, like Twin Twisters. There's almost no downside to having this card in your side deck. Destroying 2 back row cards is always a plus. If you notice that everyone is playing combo heavy decks, Nibiru and Summon Limit work really well. If you were to compete in a tier 2 event, this is where studying the meta is so important, because that is what your competition is likely to play. But what cards should you swap? I got a question a while back asking me what cards do I swap when I go to my side deck? And the best answer I can give you is... it depends. I know that's not helpful, but I'll do my best to explain. You see, Game 1 is done with your main deck, and typically side in Game 2 when you have a better understanding of what you're going against. The key is to swap out cards that were not deemed useful in the first game. So let's say I'm playing Chaos Max against True Draco. My main deck uses the Borg the Mega Monarch, a very good card in zapping my opponent's extra deck and offers me good graveyard effects. True Draco doesn't use an extra deck, and seeing I'm unable to search the Borg, I should not rely on its win condition, so that's a card that I would side out. However, what if every card in your main deck is important, but your side deck has great disruption? How do you fit it in? Well, the key to this is to focus on your main deck's core strategy. Don't remove anything that will keep its consistency. If you have multiple methods of searching out one card, you can remove one or two of the searchers if it means you can continue with your other plays by siding. My Chaos Max has many ways to search out the cards that I need, so a bingo machine doesn't really mean anything if I have a fully functional incantation engine and Melody of Awakening Dragon, so I often replace it with something that will help me with my matchup. Overall, side decking is a balancing act, but if you do it right, it can mean the difference between a win and a loss. So if you see your opponent reach for their side deck during your match, you can take it as a compliment that your deck has risen to the challenge and all victories have to be worked for. So having said all that, what are the most common cards do you use in your side deck? Do you play any cards that no one else sees coming? Leave a comment below and remember to be a good sport, play the game, not the fame. See ya! Thanks for watching! If you like what you see, subscribe and be sure to click on the bell for notifications. You can also check me out on Facebook. The link is in the description below. Happy dueling!